Okay, welcome back to another author interview at Crystal Lake. And today our guest is Brad Ricks, and he's going to be talking about his new book, The Night Crew. And I'm going to let him introduce himself, so take it away.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be on. Like I said, my name's Brad Ricks. I wrote the novel Night Crew. It comes out February 18th, and I'm a fairly new author. My debut came out in July of 24. Live down here in Texas with my wife and a whole ton of teenagers in the house, so it keeps me very busy between that and doing the writing stuff.
Okay, so give everyone a quick overview of the book. What's The Night Crew about?
Um, so the Night Crew, it's a story of so the main character, his name's Michael. So he comes home from work and finds his wife is being murdered. He actually comes in right kind of toward the tail end of it. Uh, Tries to fight off her killer, but the guy gets away. uh, the local detective is not very much help. He even at one point kind of accuses Mike, is like, "Hey, did you kill your wife?" And so Mike, he decides to look into it on his own, follows some clues that kind of puts him face to face with that killer, and a very startling revelation that his wife's killer is a vampire. He almost kind of becomes a food himself when a group of hunters jump in. The group calls themselves the Night Crew, and he joins up with them to hopefully get some revenge on his wife's death.
Okay, so what were your inspirations for writing the book?
So the first kind of seeds of it came. I was actually watching one of the Mission Impossible movies, and I got to thinking. I was like, most kind of like vampire hunter books, there's kind of that Van Helsing like character who kind of
Mm,
swoops in and like they're the expert, they're the ones who do everything. And so kind of looking at the idea of like that Mission Impossible style team, I was like, it'd be interesting if like that was their job as was vampire hunting. And from that, the rest of it kind of grew. Yeah, I wanted it to be from a kind of an outsider's perspective, which is why then I came up with we have our main character Mike, and you as the reader are learning about this world and what's going on kind of as the same time as he is. So it's written from it's first person narrative, so it's written from Mike's point of view. And so like I said, as he's learning about things, so are you. But yeah, like I said, it really came from just wanting it to be a team of hunters and not just like I said, that one kind of Ben Helsing style kind of character.
So, your team of hunters, did you go like, is it like a government sort of thing, or are they like an independent crew?
Um, so there is uh, there's kind of an you can from the dialogue you can tell there is an organization that they are a part of. And they call them well, you meet a character who they call Intel, who kind of gives them all the intelligence information. Hey, there's a there's a new hive that's being set up over here, go take it out. Or and then there's a group called the Council that you learn that is kind of a group of um, kind of like a group of kind of the heads of all the different kinds of creatures. So in this world, kind of everything is real. And so the council has kind of made an agreement with governments, humans, whatever, to say how kind of how many you can kill and how many you can. So there's an agreement between the council and human. So there is an overarching little I won't say like a governmental structure, but there's definitely an organization there.
Sort of like the things you saw in Buffy and a little bit in like in Supernatural as well, sounds like.
Little bit, yeah.
Okay, so what is it about the vampire mythology that intrigues you?
Um, so vampires have always been kind of my favorite when it comes to some of the creatures. I mean, I grew up watching some of the old like Hammer films with Christopher Lee was always playing Dracula and Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, and so they were always from a supernatural creature. They've always been kind of my favorite from that. Um, I think it's a lot of it, as I get to thinking about, what about them kind of sets them apart. A lot of how they're perceived or portrayed in movies and things like that, especially those that are kind of like the Dracula style kind of creature. They have control of themselves. They are doing what they want to do. You get the other creatures like werewolves and stuff, and they're kind of more out of control. A lot of people, in the movies, a lot of those who are afflicted with, being a werewolf, once they kind of meet their end, they're always kind of grateful that they've been killed or something like that. Where vampires are kind of like, hey, this is what we do and we love doing it. And so um, they've always had some of that kind of control of themselves, and they do what they do because they want to. I think some of that may have kind of started to change with, like, Interview with the Vampire. Louis kind of hated who he was, and so which kind of added a little complexity to it, in the character. You mentioned Buffy. You kind of get that with, like, Spike and how his character development went in Buffy throughout the course of the series, and where he had some character development, some growth that happened. It wasn't just he's just there to kill. Um, and then Twilight, kind of the same kind of thing. But so it's somewhat changed, but I tend to lean towards more the kind of the old school, some of the '90s, Blade, 30 Days of Night kind of stuff.
Yeah, the modern vampires do have a lot of angst, don't they?
Yeah, a lot of angst, a lot of there is a lot of the, oh, maybe, as the female perspective of, I can save him. It's like, the vampire, you're not supposed to save him.
You're supposed to stake him. Okay, so tell us a little bit about the main character. What can readers expect and what can they connect with?
So Mike is, for the most part, just kind of your average blue collar guy. He's, him and his wife, it's just the two of them. They had plans to kind of start a family. And now his whole world's kind of been, you know, turned upside down. Um, so, I think as readers, you can kind of connect with that because we've all, in some way or another, throughout the course of our lives, we had things we were expecting to go one way, and it totally got flipped around on us. We've all experienced some kind of a loss, whether it's, from a parent, a spouse, a grandparent, something. So, I'm hoping as readers you can um, connect with that aspect of Mike as he's, one, grieving, the death of his wife. A lot of this happens, the majority of the story happens within days of her funeral. And so it's all very new of what's happening. So he's going through that grief and trying to cope. Um, Kind of, I guess, fortunately for him, he's coping with being able to, um, he's kind of coping with being able to seek revenge, and so, which hopefully is different than how some of us cope with grief, but it's a little bit of outlet for him. So, yeah, so I'm hoping, readers are able to, connect with him on just that he's not anything extraordinary. He's just an ordinary person who's getting thrown into a extraordinary situation.
Okay, so what's your favorite scene that you wrote in the book without spoilers?
Without spoilers. So I think my favorite scene is when I introduced the character of Thomas. So he's actually a vampire that works with the night crew. And in the scene there, it's the first time Mike is going with the kind of the main group to go on a hunt, so to say. And he hadn't had a chance to meet Thomas yet. And the team's on the raid. A vampire kind of gets away and goes to attack Mike and is actually standing over him, about to kill him. And then Thomas shows up and saves him. And it's a I and without giving away what happens. So he saves him in a very vampire-esque way and how he would handle it. So it's one of my favorite scenes in the story.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene for you to write?
Um, Probably as we get towards the end of the story, and things are kind of coming to a head. There's a couple moving parts that are all happening at the same time. So as I was as I was going through and kind of writing that out, I had to make sure, like, I had a notepad next to me. I was kind of making notes on, okay, well, okay, I have them going over here and I have them going here, because as dealing with a team, it's written from Mike's perspective, but they all are communicating with each other what's happening, what's going on. And so I'm I had to kind of make sure I actually drew out a map of the places that they were in. I'm like, now he goes here, then he goes here. And so so almost like I was directing it. And so that was probably one of the hardest, because I hadn't done something like that before. Um, and making sure everything stayed in sync with where it needed to be.
Yeah, you don't wanna put one guy over there in the corner and then have him in the next scene in the middle of the room.
Right. So yeah, it was definitely, and still, while again you're doing everything from first person, and so it's all from the one person's perspective, but as the reader you want to know, hey, where's this person, what happened to him, and why, you know if Mike's in danger here, why isn't anybody coming to help? And so it's, wanting to make sure that everything happens in a certain order and in certain places, so that you still have that tension and that that thriller kind of aspect that's going on.
Okay, so how long have you been writing?
um I mean, I started writing as a kid. I used to write short stories, things like that. Just I would mimic some of the writers that I liked, and just kind of trying to find my voice, that kind of thing. Got away from it a lot when I was in college. Got into music and did songwriting, so I guess still kind of writing, but I was doing more songwriting at the time. And then it wasn't until I think it was late 2019, kind of just before COVID, actually, that I got laid off from the job I had at the time. And so in my downtime from job hunting, I was like, kind of been kicking around a story idea. And so I was like, well, while I'm not doing anything right now, I'm going to go ahead and start writing as well. And so I, first kind of sketch out and wrote a novel that sits in a drawer, will never come out because it's not good. Um,
Well, we
but
all have that.
but that was the first one. That's Learner. And so, but then after that, the floodgates just started, you know, opening up, and then, um, slowly started to really kind of tweak and hone my craft. Done a lot. Started doing a lot of listening to podcasts, and reading books, and that kind of stuff. And I'm an avid reader, so as I was reading, as the more I started writing, I started paying attention more uh, to some of the um, structure, or some of the actual pieces inside of writing, compared to just the story itself. And the
Mm.
some of the more mechanics of it. And um, yeah, so really, like I said, my first kind of novel that I wrote was probably, I think I finished it probably in 2020, in the middle of COVID. And then but then after that, it definitely kind of you know I definitely got a lot better after that then.
Okay, so why did you decide to write in the horror genre? What appeals to you about horror?
Oh, so I've always loved horror. I mean, even when I was a kid, like I said, I grew up watching, like I said, some of the Hammer films, and um, loved all the B horror movies that you would find, that I could find. Um, to me, horror. It's a thrill ride, that you kind of get to experience while sitting in your chair in your living room, under the covers at night. A good to me, a good horror novel really kind of puts you on a roller coaster of emotions. You're scared along with your character. You mourn when something bad happens to a character, or one of your favorite one is killed. You cringe and try to read with your eyes almost closed. As the book describes a brutal death scene in some kind of graphic detail. So it just, where other genres don't really to me doesn't seem like they have a lot of those same kind of um like the kind of the breadth of different emotions that it can kind of send you on.
Okay, so what do you enjoy most about writing horror?
um So yeah, I said, horror. I like horror because it's like a roller coaster, and so I kind of like writing it so I can put readers on that roller coaster as well. Um, I had done a blog post at one point that was talking about why horror, like why that I like doing it, and um, I kind of said even I wrote in there that said that horror you put readers on kind of a whole gambit of emotions, um, and you get to put real people into some kind of horrific situations. It's and I say real people because most of the time these aren't superheroes that are going against the supernatural. These are ordinary people that have to kind of prevail against something or die trying. Um it wasn't the Avengers who went up against it was the Losers Club. It was a in Cycle of the Werewolf, it was a boy in a wheelchair who was going against a werewolf. It's those kind of like, it's in the horror genre, so it's a real situation or real people that get put in those kind of situations. And so I like writing that because you are kind of writing real people. I felt, if I was writing something where it was, like, Superman always wins kind of at the end, so I think that would kind of get boring to write after a while.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting aspect of horror is that you never know what to expect for the ending, whether they'll survive or not, because either way with horror, it can go either way.
Right, exactly.
So, what's the hardest part of writing horror fiction for you, and did any of writing the book give you trouble?
um so when I first started, probably the hardest part was kind of maintaining tension. I had to keep kind of telling myself it's okay to, to kind of to dial up to dial it up and keep adding that pressure into your characters. That's one thing. The more, as I'm reading books, I'm seeing how, yeah, it's always you just, I saw something once where the main antagonist is actually the writer because you're the one that keeps doing stuff to your protagonist more so than than whatever the evil creature is. It's like we're really the bad guys, but we enjoy doing it. So but so first starting was just reminding myself that hey, it's okay to just keep piling it on and keep adding pressure to what you're doing to your characters. um I had a so local to me there's a book club that I'm part of, and they did my debut novel, which came out in July. They did it as a book club read, and it was real funny because towards towards the end of the book there's a certain death that happens that a lot of the people in the book club, they were like, no, why did he have to die? And I was like, well, who would you rather have had me? Do you want me to kill a kid? And they were like, yes. I was like, all right, duly noted, got it, okay. um
Yeah, as long as it's not the dog, they're fine.
right. So I actually had somebody say that. They're like, as long as you don't kill an animal, we're good. I'm like, alrighty. So like I took a poll on who they wanted me to kill, and like it was unanimous. Like they even picked the kid they wanted to die, and I was like, well, it's like, well, never mind. Y'all are a bunch of cruel people. Um, now with this one, so in Night Crew, so one of the things with Night Crew, it definitely kind of threads the needle between horror and then action. There's a lot of action, very similar to like Blade or The Lost Boys. That it has a lot of action oriented elements to it. So with this one, I think the hardest thing was kind of maintaining that balance, especially the later on it gets in the book. It got real easy to almost want to slip into being more of an action novel, and so I had to keep reminding myself that it's like, no, we still got to maintain that horror nerve and lean on that as well. So being able to kind of sit on the fence between horror and action was probably the hardest thing when it came to Night Crew.
Okay, so who are some of your favorite authors?
Um, well, I mean, you can't write horror and not say Stephen King. So we'll just kind of chalk that up into the given column, kind of like those first letters they give you in Wheel of Fortune. It's like that's just there. Um, so yeah, I mean, definitely, I was a huge King fan, but even more so, I think Poe, Edgar Allan Poe is probably more my favorite. Um, I mean, everything he did with all the short stories, just in a few pages, like
Mm.
he makes you the character in just those handful of pages that his short stories are. Um, I mean, you're in the walls with Fortunato, and you feel the blade getting closer and hitting the pendulum. It like um, the vividness of what he could write, and his poetry is the same way. It's just it's alive in what's happening. And so Poe's probably definitely my favorite. Um, I'm definitely more of a classic literature person. Um, a, a huge fan of Charles Dickens. Tale of Two Cities is one of my favorite books. Um, Alexander Dumas, The Count of Monte Cristo to me is like a blueprint for revenge. It's a great
Mm,
it's a great book. Um, and then lately, with as I've been into this, the horror writing journey and doing stuff with more indie stuff. um a lot of the just indie horror authors have been, especially ones that I've started becoming friends with, and I'm reading their stuff. I mean, there's I just love kind of the indie horror genre. It's definitely a lot of out of the box and boundary pushing stuff that's kind of happening.
definitely. So, you've mentioned you've written another novel, so tell us a little bit about that.
So I've had two that have been published so far. So my debut, which came out in July, it's called Fear Not the Dead. It's about a woman who is dealing with some trauma from her youth. Her therapist recommends that she go back to where the trauma occurred. She has some. Her therapist has kind of some secret motivations to sending her back there as well. And then, uh, but what neither of them realize is that the house that they're going to is it's like this very big estate kind of bed and breakfast kind of place. It's haunted. Anybody who or anything that's died there, their spirit just kind of stuck there. And so it very much, a lot of it reads almost like a psychological thriller. But again, it's set in a haunted house, so there's the main character. She already thinks she's crazy, and now shadows are moving when they're not supposed to. um, so that was my debut that came out in July. Um, I do a lot of I mess with time a little bit in it because she doesn't remember a lot of what happened in her youth, and so um, as she's there, she's some of those memories are starting to come back, and so she finds herself kind of flashing back to when she was there as a child. And then my most recent book that came out, so it came out in November, and it was a Christmas horror called To Hell with Hallmark. Um, so yeah, that's usually
Yeah,
the
I love
reaction
the
everybody
title.
gets. Everybody loves the title. It's great. And Yeah, so To Hell with Hallmark. It takes place in the picturesque town of Hallmark, Vermont, which is like this beautiful setting that kind of all Hallmark Christmas movies are set in. You could, if, as soon as you say it's the setting where all Hallmark Christmas movies, I didn't even really need to describe the town. Everybody already has has an idea of what it looks like. Um, but it is that beautiful place where it's where the lonely librarian runs into the man of her dreams, or a secret prince is hiding away from his royal duties and comes to town and finds true love, or it's every cheesy Hallmark movie kind of plot. And it's actually it's a series of short stories, but they all kind of set up a Hallmark oriented trope, and then I give it a horror twist. Um, and so, but it all takes place in that one town, and so the stories actually somewhat interconnect. Like you'll see characters from one will show up in a different story, so it feels like one connected world.
That sounds cool. I may have to look that one up 'cause I really
it
love the
was
premise on that one.
so yeah, it was a fun one to write. And it actually somewhat came from like a I was tossing the idea around, and shortly after Fear Not the Dead came out, I was tossing the idea around, and some people from the book club I'm in, they were like, "Yeah, you need to write that. That'll be great." And so within it, because it's about 11 short stories, and so I pretty much cranked them out as quickly as I could, and took about a month and a half or so, and I had it ready, and got over to a publisher, and she was the same publisher that did Fear Not the Dead, and so she's like, "Yep, we can get it on the docket." I was like, "Sweet." so so yeah, so it came out in November. um
Okay. Okay, so what's next for you? Do you have any, Little teasers you can share?
Well, so I just had a manuscript that I sent off to a publisher for that I'd gotten a full request for, so kind of anxiously awaiting that reply. Um, and then, in the interim, I've actually started book three of the Night Crew series because it is a series. Book two, is coming out via Crystal Lake in October. So, hopefully as we get in October, I'll be chatting with you again. Um, but yeah, book two comes out in October. Crystal Lake has already picked it up, and I'm actively writing book three right now.
Cool, cool. Lots to look forward to.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, we'll wrap the interview up here. I'd like to thank you for being a guest today. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Oh, you as well. I appreciate it. It's fun.
Okay, and that's it for this episode, and bye for now.